Great. Excellent. Thank you for starting the recording.
Hello, I'm here, everyone, but I'm eating lunch, so I'm going to turn my video off. Nice to see you all.
Thank you. And well, I guess there's no real need for introductions. We don't have that many committee members here. So if you're going to be doing the briefing, when you speak, please identify yourself. And what the heck, it's a committee meeting. Let's do that. I'm Dave Marymount, Senator for Senate District 12, Knox County, and my co-chair.
I'm Representative Jay McCreight, representing Harpswell, West Bath, and part of Brunswick in the House.
Representative Bloom.
I'm Representative Lydia Bloom. I represent York, House District 3.
Representative Hepler.
Hi, I'm Allison Hepler. I represent Aroustic, Georgetown, Pittsburgh, Woolwich, Dresden, and part of Richmond.
Thank you. Representative Crafts.
Hi, I'm Lydia Crafts. I represent House District 90, which includes Newcastle, Damascotta, Bristol, Bremen, part of South Bristol, part of Noblesboro, and Monhegan Island.
Thank you. Representative McDonald.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Representative Genevieve McDonald, and I represent House District 134, which is the offshore islands of Penobscot Bay and Western Frenchman's Bay.
Thank you. That's all the committee members I see at the moment. Deirdre Gilbert welcome Deirdre Gilbert. Welcome Meredith Mendelson. Aaron, I also know that Representative Dudera, Representative Matlack are both on in the participant list. We can't have everyone introduce themselves. I'm sorry. If Deirdre Snyder, if you see any other committee members, you'll let them in since you're running the board. And we'll start with the department and the briefing. And again, introduce yourself as you begin. And Megan Ware has been working on this with me and the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission. And as part of the Atlantic States Marine Fisheries Commission, before she worked for the state and for the department, and she's here and has a real depth of knowledge, as well as the department, just maybe a longer history with this issue and many others around our fisheries. So thank you for being here. All right, take it away, department. Unless anyone has any questions. And Deirdre Gilbert has a hand up, but I meant committee first. Seeing none. Deirdre Gilbert.
Thank you, Senator Marymount. I just want to let you know the commissioner's computer issue is not resolved, so I'm going to give up my seat for him since we're both in the office, so we're going to swap out.
Oh, thank you. Afternoon, Commissioner.
Hey, thank you. Sorry about the technical difficulties here. I'm not sure what's going on. It's my weekly restart, and it's always the worst timing possible. So I appreciate
just to make, could you lower the hand that Deirdre put up, please, if you can there, so we'll know if you actually want to raise it. And then, since you're here, we'll start with you, and you can direct it to whoever else you want.
Great. Thank you, Senator. And just good morning, committee. In case you forgot who I was, I'm Pat Kelleher, Commissioner of DMR. It's good seeing your faces again. What we're going to do here this morning is I'm going to have Megan Ware jump in and give an update of the whale rule and compare it to what we asked for within our comments that were submitted quite some time ago, and then be happy to do just an open Q&A of where we are and what the department is currently up to.
Thank you, Commissioner. And I see Representative Alley has joined us. Good afternoon, Representative Alley.
Yes, sir. Good afternoon to you too.
And Ms. Ware, please go ahead.
Thank you, Senator, for the introduction. Megan Ware, Director of External Affairs at DMR. So I'm just going to walk through what was included in the final rule, and as Pat said, try and provide some context for what we commented on in our comments on the proposed rule and the final environmental impact statement. So there's really three primary elements of the final rule, and I'll start with the closure because I suspect that's of great interest to some individuals. So the closure is is in the final rule for the months of October through January, and it impacts zones C, D, and E in their offshore waters. It's outside of 12 miles from shore, and it abuts the area 1-3 line. So if you can picture the different lobster management areas in your head, it's along that line there. The implementation date for that closure is 30 days after publication of the final rule in the Federal Register. I have not checked today to see if it was published, but as of last week when I last checked, it had not been published. So we are still waiting to start that 30-day clock. And I will double check that while we are on the call here today. In kind of the evolution of this closure, so this was included in the proposed rule that came out from NOAA, and in our comments on the proposed rule, we had recommended a trigger approach, where if a right whale was sighted in that area in year 1, then the closure would be implemented in year 2. So trying to base it on seeing whales in that area. Obviously, NOAA did not move forward with that approach. In our comments on the final environmental impact statement, we had recommended that Zone E not be included in the closure in the months of January and December. That area really wasn't popping as a hotspot during those last 2 months. So we had recommended that that area be removed for those 2 months. Obviously, NOAA did not accept that recommendation either. Something to consider with the closure is ropeless fishing is allowed in that area through an exempted fishing permit. So an exempted fishing permit, I describe it kind of like a hall pass from a specific regulation. You have to apply through NOAA for an exempted fishing permit, and it allows you to fish without the use of a vertical buoy line, because right now in federal regulation, you would need to use a buoy line with your gear. In addition to that, you would also need a special license from DMR, since we also require the use of a vertical line with gear. And in the final rule and the final environmental impact statement, there's a series of criteria that fishermen need to meet in addition to having that EFP to be able to test ropeless gear out there. So there's certainly, I'm sure, conversations happening about if people want to be testing that gear to access the area. There's also some enforcement considerations for that area. If enforcement is not able to haul ropeless gear, I think that can create some issues in terms of the enforcement of lobster resource management measures. So a lot of things to think about out there with this closure. The next element of the final rule is trawling up and weak points. So trawling up is adding more traps to your end line so that you fish fewer end lines. And then weak points are 1,700-pound breaking points that are designed such that if a whale was to encounter gear, the whale can break through that weak point and it wouldn't get entangled. So you would avoid a serious injury and mortality if a whale came in contact with the gear. So the good news here was over last summer, each of the lobster zones worked to come up with a proposal of a combination of trawling up and weak points that worked for their regional considerations. And a lot of them were differentiated by distance from shore. So the vast majority of those were accepted, which is great because industry put a lot of time and effort into coming up with those regional proposals. The unfortunate part is that they were not accepted outside of 12 miles from shore. So outside of 12 miles from shore, there will be kind of a universal requirement of a 25 trap trawl and 1 weak point a third of the way down. Obviously, in our proposed rule, we had recommended full adoption of the CE proposals. So a victory that some of it was accepted, and unfortunate that not all of it was accepted. And then the final element is gear marking. So in September of 2020, DMR worked to enact gear marking that was state specific for main gear. And the idea is the more specific you can be in your gear marking, the more information we will have if there is an entanglement, to know where that entanglement happened and have a more targeted approach to management measures. So we adopted a purple gear mark, and that was implemented in, as I said, September of 2020 last year. So for the purple gear mark, that is not changed. That is the same as what's in the final rule. So that part is good. The unfortunate part is we had also implemented a green mark that differentiated between exempted waters and non-exempt waters. And we felt that that was really important to distinguish those types of waters, because exempted waters are not held to all of the management measures under the take reduction plan. So it would be really important to know if an entanglement in Maine did happen, if it was in exempt or non-exempt waters. What NOAA did in their final rule was they had that green mark differentiate state and federal waters. So it is slightly different than what we had put in. Also, a change that they made from their proposed rule to the final rule is that they increased the number of green marks. So it used to be one green mark at the surface, kind of near your buoy. It is now 4 1-foot green marks throughout your line. And the challenge that this creates is, originally that single green mark at the top of the line was envisioned to be something like a zip tie or a piece of twine that you could easily put into your gear. And then if you were further offshore and you wanted to come inshore, you could take that off and have compliant gear markings. Now that you have 4 green marks throughout your line, it's going to be a lot more challenging to move gear in between these like state and federal waters and still be compliant with the gear marking. So that's a lot of work to do at sea in terms of changing the gear marking on your line. So some of the things that we've heard are that some fishermen may move to having 2 sets of end lines, one that's marked for federal waters and one that's marked for state waters. Obviously, those types of costs were not considered in the final rule, nor in the final environmental impact statement. So those are some of the things we're trying to investigate to understand this gear marking change. I will say that the gear marking change was something we did not anticipate. It was not included in the proposed rule. It kind of came last minute in the final rule. So an unfortunate change from our perspective in that people are going to have to change how they have marked their gear, and it's going to take fishermen more time and money to come into compliance with that. So I think that is everything in the final rule. Happy to take any questions on the content of that rule.
Okay. I have a hand up from Representative Bloom.
I thank you, Senator Miramont. The ropeless fishing, it's as if you speak about it, and I know that we've talked about it before in this committee, but it's being spoken to about it as like it's really possible. Is something changed?
No, Representative Bloom, nothing has changed at all. It is still a long way from full implementation. There is some research happening along the coast now with a handful of fishermen. The success rate, some of the highest success rates that I'm hearing, but with some of the research, is around a 75% success rate in a buoy retrieval. That means still 25% of the gear may not be retrieved. So that's the only time this is going to work is if that buoy could come to the surface 100% of the time. And that still doesn't include the 2 other parameters, which is the enforceability of this. So Marine Patrol needs to continue to inspect the gear. They have no way of raising or lowering that gear right now. And then beyond that is the knowledge of one fisherman to know where his fellow fisherman's gear is set. So that technology does not exist yet. And then beyond the fixed gear fishery, the mobile gear fleet needs to be able to see where that gear is, and so they don't have that as well. So we're still a long way away from seeing a successful implementation of ropeless fishing.
Follow-up, please.
Yeah.
But the NOAA rules that we were just heard about allows for ropeless fishing. Did I understand that correctly? I forgot. I didn't quite get where that ropeless fishing came into the NOAA regs.
Yeah, it allows for ropeless fishing if you wanted to access the closed area without end lines. But it's going to be very prescriptive. It's going to be done through an experimental fishing permit that would have to be issued by GARFO. And then we would have to agree, because we would also have to issue we would have to issue, a special license at the department. So we've had several conversations with NOAA leadership about trying to coordinate efforts there. You know, we don't want to be obviously a roadblock here, but we're going to have to, from the larger policy conversations, we need to continue to push on these policy issues and these interaction issues with the multiple fleets that are using the Gulf of Maine, and then the technology needs to certainly continue to improve greatly in order for it to work. So we're coming to the table now as part of those conversations, but we're going to come to the table with a really big, strong dose of reality as far as the technology and how it's going to work.
Great, thank you.
You, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I have a series of questions, if you may be so gracious as to allow that. My first question, so the seasonal closure goes into effect 30 days after it appears in the registry. Is that true for the total rule, so including the gear marking and the trawling up?
No, it's yes and no, actually, because the total rule, it's implemented after 30 days after publishing, but its direct impact is the closed area. The rest of this does not trigger till May 2022.
Okay, so there's one question. The special license and allowances from the state, does that require any legislation on our part?
It does not. It does not. That is authority that I have as commissioner to issue special licenses to get around the requirements of law or rule.
And then for my third question, for gear testing, gear marking, for these changes, we do have a couple of fishermen that are willing to try gear testing. Is there any funding available to help with any part of this?
There is, I understand, some funding that will be coming available through the federal agency. We're working on special appropriations through the federal government, working directly with our delegation on additional dollars that would hopefully come to the state for some of this work. And then there are some environmental groups out there, Zach Cliver, I can't remember the name of his group, that is doing some of this work. I think he's got some dollars and some gear available as well.
And so for gear testing, there must also be a discussion about helping with funding for gear marking.
We are in constant contact with the Maine delegation, who has been incredibly helpful. We are looking to find ways to help offset some of the financial burdens from these rules as they're being implemented. We've had conversations directly with Patrice McCarron at the MLA, in particular in regards to kind of the phase two, if you will, the implementation date of May 2021, which becomes a de facto closure for a lot of those federal permit holders as they pull all their gear out, reconfigure gear, and then set it back. So there's a lost revenue component that we're looking at as well. I was invited down to Stonington to meet with a handful of fishermen. I think we had 30 or 40 fishermen. It was a union meeting. We talked a lot about those same type of things, and a lot of those concerns were brought forward to me that night as far as kind of a lost revenue component too. So we have fed all of that information to the delegation through ASMSC as my role as chair. We're having, through the commission process, having direct conversations with appropriation staff as well. So we feel confident that some amount of money will come out of this effort.
Thank you, Commissioner. That was all the questions I had.
Thank you.
Thank you, Representative. And Commissioner, you had mentioned several times over the last couple of years about the ropeless fishing and I was never clear. I know you don't want to be as a department a roadblock to anything that will help people fish.
Yeah.
But all you did was make me believe that there is nothing at this point that would keep them from dropping their trawl on top of another until that whole mass is lost because it'll be too heavy to haul. Are you seeing something that will allow that now so that you might be able to issue a permit, or are we still in that place?
Aaron Summers is spearheading some work with the agency, and actually we have a meeting. As soon as I'm off this call, I'm jumping in the truck to drive to a meeting with Aaron and some other individuals about exactly what that technology would be. There's some people here within the state that have that knowledge and expertise. They've invented some systems that are let's just say they're part of our daily lives now. I've been not, it's some of the conversations are proprietary, so I'm being a little vague here, but it's something that is very much of an interest to the department to try to solve this as quickly as we can. And while on that topic, and not being a roadblock, I mean, we have been said we are, the DMR was, I heard quoted, DMR was the roadblock to ropeless. We probably were, because we were really bringing up very critical issues associated to the effectiveness of ropeless fishing. We're in a very different situation now, right? We have to be at the table. We have to talk about these things from a reality standpoint, but we have to do it in a way that really takes some common sense into consideration. And we need to look at it as the whole picture, not just the lobster fishery, but the lobster fishery and the mobile gear fleets as well. So we're going to continue to work on those type of issues. And in the interim, I have directed just this morning, Maine Marine Patrol, we've been into conversations as an agency, but I've directed them this morning to pull together some key fishermen that are really impacted from the closure to talk about an experimental fishing approach that we as an agency could put together and sponsor with the federal government. We're trying to look at different technologies. We're trying to look at different processes, but that's something that is very much a priority for us to do, and to see if we can't develop something. And it's important to point out, even if we develop something in a month, the roadblock could then be the approval of that with GARFO. So we're continuing to have those conversations at a very high level with the federal government to make sure that if we can find a way forward to gain additional access back to the closed area, that it can be done in an expedited fashion. But that's yet to be seen what it would be, and we will then get an update from the agency of how long they think it might take to approve.
Thank you. And Representative Bloom, then my Chair McCreight after.
Thank you, Chair. So there's three aspects to these rules: the closure, the breaking points in the rope, and the gear marking. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So
And the trawling up, and the trawling up.
And the trawling up, right. So the gear marking, if you could just repeat the timeline, because you said last September they had to do purple by September 2020. What more gear marking has to be done, and in what timeline?
Representative, what the department did was to try to get ahead of the federal rulemaking, and we developed a gear marking scenario which they approved of, and we advanced with the understanding after conversations with the federal agency that those would be adequate for the goals of the federal agency. They then pulled a fast one on us, and they have changed the gear marking within the rule by adding, it was about exempted waters and non-exempted waters. Now it's about state waters and federal waters, and they've added the green mark for the state water side of this. So it's the conundrum here for the industry is they felt like they've already done this work. They did it up front, they did it proactively, we did it proactively, and now they are being required to do more. And so we're trying to figure out, okay, what are our next steps going to be as far as state rulemaking? Are we going to adopt that as a state rule? And so that's a conversation that I'm still having with staff.
But what's the timeline then of the requirement?
We would have to have that in place for the May 2022 timeframe.
Thank you.
Representative McCray.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. I just can't resist saying that I don't think advocacy is road blocking, it's advocacy. And just to state the obvious, that if Genevieve presaged this asking about legislation, but if something's needed, I think we'd love to hear about it.
Yeah, thank you, Representative McCray. We have not identified anything from a statutory change yet. I do know that Representative McDonald has had several conversations about some potential law changes for allowing more access kind of east and west from fishermen's and we've had some preliminary conversations a few years ago with the industry about an offshore zone. I've talked a little bit about it with Deidre after the preliminary conversations with Representative McDonald, and it's something we will look at. I can tell you that it will be an incredibly controversial, that whole idea becomes controversial because people feel like they're going to lose bottom if people are shifting more gears. So it's not an easy conversation, but it's probably one we're going to have to consider having.
Thank you. And we'll welcome Representative Fockingham. It looks like he joined us from his boat. And Representative McDonald is next, then Representative Hepler and Representative Crafts with questions. Go ahead, Representative McDonald.
Thank you, Chair. I'm really just looking for confirmation of numbers that I've already heard. Can you confirm for us, Commissioner, estimated how many fishermen will be displaced by this closure? Is it 100 roughly?
It's probably more north of that, upward is 150-ish. We don't have a good exact number, but based on our best estimate, it's probably in that ballpark.
Thank you.
Representative Hepler.
Yeah, I guess I'm curious about the extra green markings and the way that was changed. Is there, given what the way Megan explained it, was there any rationale about why they added the extra green marks that would then make it really difficult to move your gear in and out?
Yeah, it's to differentiate state versus federal. So if there is an entanglement, they could have a better understanding if that entanglement happened offshore versus inshore. We thought we had adequately addressed that associated with exempted waters, but obviously at the end of the day, the federal agency at some point disagreed with us, didn't communicate that, and then move forward with the gear marking.
Representative Krause.
Thank you, Commissioner. I was wondering, can you give us a ballpark estimate of the numbers for the offset costs and lost revenue that you're talking about? What are the projections at this point?
So they range on an individual basis from 15 to roughly 25,000, maybe closer to 30,000, based on some of the estimates from the individuals I heard, and because that depends on what the boat price is at the time and other factors, and how long the changeover would be.
Well, thank you. And I don't have any other questions at the moment. So did you have someone else that was going to be part of a briefing, or?
I did not, unless there's specific questions. The one thing I did want to update the committee on is kind of the lawsuit side of the equation. Just the one question that I've asked is, when is DMR going to sue the federal government over these actions? In order to file, anybody can file a lawsuit, as we all know, but to file a lawsuit and be successful is another thing. You've probably heard me say many times that the federal agency will have extreme deference with the courts in these cases. This case is no different. We have talked to our attorneys about the rule, and the legal advice that we have received so far is that we really don't have a case as it pertains to these existing rules. You're also all well aware, based on previous briefings, that the Fifth Circuit Court in DC has a suit in front of it that was a very active lawsuit regarding right whales. The environmental groups, Center for Biological Diversity, Humane Society, Conservation Law Foundation, filed suit around the BIOP. The BIOP was vacated. The federal agency had to propose a new BIOP, which they did. The new BIOP at the end of 10 years requires a 98% risk reduction. Since the release of this rule, and the courts have been fairly active, the ENGOs have filed additional motions for injunctive relief, immediate injunctive relief, to put more protections in place. They've clearly said within the press that these rules do not go far enough, fast enough. And just last Friday, we learned that the judge in this case, Judge Boasberg, is going to allow for a supplemental complaint to go forward within the existing lawsuit. And it's my understanding that I've not read the motion myself yet, but the draft motion, they are going after the BIOP again, saying that it's not protective of right whales immediately because of the 10-year management window that is built into it. And it's not achieving PBR for 10 years, the potential biological removal. And then they're also likely to attack the rule itself because the model projections say that we should have achieved an 80% risk reduction with the rule and not a 60% risk reduction. Because of all of this, I've worked with Governor Mills and Secretary Fry, and we've received special permission to hire outside legal counsel. So the Department of Marine Resources has now entered into an agreement with a firm in Seattle, Washington called Nossaman. Linda Larson, and we have hired Linda Larson as our attorney in this case, and we will be filing motions to intervene in this particular case. Timing is not sure when. This is a very expensive process, and Governor Mills has committed $250,000 towards legal fees here. That'll probably be the tip of the iceberg, depending on the direction that this case goes. But we are going to be very actively engaged in that federal case, assuming that our motion to intervene will be granted.
Thank you, Commissioner. Now, Deirdre, could you bring in Representative Evangelos? And in the meantime, Representative McCray had a question.
He's on his way.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Commissioner, I've been reading about the concerns about fishermen, the displaced fishermen going to other areas and conflict potential. Is that, could you say something about that?
It's guaranteed to happen. It is where the Maine Marine Patrol is likely going to be spending the majority of its time as gear is shifted to other areas. I think that's specifically the issue that Representative McDonald has brought to the department about trying to find ways to give more flexibility for fishermen to move to other areas. But in the interim, it is certainly something that will be incredibly problematic. Whenever these it's not like we have a lot of experience with closed areas in the lobster fishery and shifting gear, but in this case, we will certainly see that. They saw it to a lesser extent in Massachusetts when some of those closed areas happened, but we'll certainly see it here. That is a time of year when the price is very high. There's a lot of gear being shifted into that area, and now just under 1,000 square nautical miles of fishing bottom is going to be lost, and that gear is going to go somewhere. It is not going back to the bank. I continue to hear people say that fishermen, well, maybe fishermen won't fish there. They'll just bring some gear home. These are fishermen who are going to fish, right? They're fishermen that are fishing almost year round, if not year round. And this bottom has extreme value to them. And so they're going to look for other areas to go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Representative Evangelos, welcome. And you had a question?
Yes, I did. Hi, David. Can you hear me okay?
I can.
Okay. Hello, Commissioner, and thank you for holding the meeting for us. Obviously, we're getting a lot of phone calls. And I agree with Representative McCrate. Common sense and reason is not obstruction. And thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
One of the things I want the lawyers to explore, although it's not fishing related, it's a principle of law. And I don't believe collective punishment is constitutional. So I hope your lawyers will take a look at that. That kind of conduct was specifically outlawed in the Nuremberg Convention. You know, you can't have a constitutional process that involves a ship strike in Canada, and so you go and go after the main fleet. You know, somebody took a pot shot at a German soldier, and they went to the nearest village and burned it down. That's not the way it works. So I think we might have a case on collective punishment because NOAA's admitted we've never hurt a whale.
Thank you, Representative. All I can say from a legal standpoint is our attorneys are very good, came highly recommended, and we'll be looking at all the aspects of laws associated with this case. The point that you raised around Canada is an important one in this case. I want everybody on the call to remember that even the BIOP says that even if we are 100% successful in implementing rules here, if whales do not stop dying in Canada and we do not, and we continue to see a very low birth rate, this species could continue to go extinct. So we have outside influences that you have mentioned, Representative Evangelos, that are incredibly problematic. This industry is looking for some level of certainty, and we'll never get certainty when we have the influence from Canada and the loss of right whales in Canada and low birth rates. So and ship strikes. So those are things that we'll continue to push for and try to address.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Representative Fockingham.
Can you hear me all right?
Yes, thanks.
Thanks. Good afternoon, Commissioner. I have a question about the financial impact that they came up with. It seems extremely low and the numbers very flawed on that to me. They said that it would impact 60 fishermen at 5 to 10%. Is that fair or correct, what I'm getting out of that?
I would look to Meredith or Megan to answer that question. We do think that they were severely underestimating the impacts, but Megan, do you have those numbers?
Yeah, what they did for their methods is they assumed, or they estimate 120 vessels fish outside of 12 miles in zones C, D, and E. And then they say the closure is about half of that area. So 60 fishermen fish in that area and will be impacted. They do assume a 5 to 10% catch decrease because they assume that gear is gonna not go home but go somewhere else. But they also consider things like if you're not fishing, if you're fishing closer to shore, there are fuel savings and things like that, right? So they're doing, they are assuming that there are some benefits as well to fishing closer to shore. So that impacts their cost estimates.
That good?
Can I follow up on that?
Certainly.
Commissioner, I just want to point out that that is incredibly wrong. Those findings are incredibly wrong financially. And also, I just did some quick math. If you do the numbers on the 60 fishermen at 10% and divide that by 25 trap trawls, that comes out to 192 end lines. And if it's at 5%, that's 100 end lines. So they're justifying the closure of 1,000 square miles for 100 end lines. That seems pretty ridiculous. And also, I spoke to a fisherman 2 days ago that fishes 100% year round in that area. I mean, you only really got to find 3 or 4 guys to come up with the amount of money that they're talking about for that whole area. So it's absolutely just ridiculous what they're coming up with for a financial number on that impact. And I want that to be known and disputed, because it's a drastic underestimate of that financial impact.
Yeah, we have raised our concerns regarding their financial estimates throughout this entire process. I think it is important to point out, when it comes to the Endangered Species Act, the economic impacts are not considered as well. So I believe they are under MMPA, but not under ESA. So it's kind of a chilling effect when you think that there is a federal law that doesn't take those type of things into account, but that's the case here.
Thank you. And there are different species of the right whale. This is the northern right whale we're talking about. Are there multiple others, or what? And what's their status under the endangered species? Are they endangered?
There is a southern right whale. It is a genetically different species, and it is not imperiled and not something we would see here. There are certainly other species of whales that are either endangered or threatened that are considered as part of the planning here, but the main focus is the North Atlantic right whale.
And I just asked that because I wondered if there's anything to learn by the fact that the southern right whale is not endangered, what has helped its viability in the face of threats everywhere in the world on fishing and fast boats, large fast boats, and the sort of things that are endangering the northern right whale. Is there anything to be learned there?
Aaron, do you want to comment on that? I know this is an issue that's come up many times that you've spoken on.
Sure. Yeah, the southern right whale actually lives off the coast of Africa. So it's an entirely different environment, and they have a much different level of kind of the urban threats that the North Atlantic right whale has. It's not, the North Atlantic right whale ranges from Florida up through Canada. So it's going past a lot of major ports and fishing industries, and that's not generally the case with the southern right whale.
So no help from that, just too different.
No, unfortunately.
I'm sorry. Thank you. Yeah. Representative Bloom, go ahead.
Thank you. Commissioner, just to clarify, so I'll make sure I understand this correctly. The only action that you're able to take right now is to join a lawsuit already in progress, correct? That's what you're doing about the BiOp?
That is correct. From a legal standpoint, we think this is a big blow to the industry, but what could come from that lawsuit is much more extreme than what we're seeing in this rule. So we believe that it is very appropriate to spend and focus our legal efforts within that DC Circuit Court case.
And to follow up, but in terms of this rule, we are in a position now where we must accept it, and there's no other thing that we can do about it. We're considering some options that I'm not really prepared to kind of go into detail, because I'm not sure if they're viable yet, and I don't want to get folks' hopes up.
But we are looking at a few other issues associated to the particular rule. And then, as I said earlier, we're very, very engaged with the delegation and their help to help offset some of these rules. So those type of conversations, the conversations that Governor Mills is having directly with the Secretary of Commerce about these impacts as well will continue. And we're hoping that as we move forward, we can find ways to create balances between protection of right whales while still remaining economically viable as a fishery.
But we need to adhere to this rule now, as far as we know.
Yes.
Thank you.
And Commissioner, I know you talked about efforts to do something with Canada, either in your position or with the federal delegation. Anything going on there that it looks positive, or at least their end of killing?
We've had several conversations with the new head of NOAA, Janet Coit. She's been very approachable and very open. She has not yet had her first meeting with Canada. And she has committed to raising the issue of including either states or the Atlantic State Marine Fisheries Commission as with a representative to represent states' interest in those meetings. She understands the reason we're bringing it up, especially from our standpoint, where we're more than 85% of the entire U.S. fishery, that we remain engaged at that level. So they continue to express that these are government to government conversations and negotiations. I respect that, but respectfully also disagree with their approach, considering that as a presidential appointment that I have under then President Obama to the Atlantic Salmon International Treaty for the Protection of Atlantic Salmon, I'm at the table in those negotiations. So what's the difference, really, other than the fact that there's no signed treaty? It's still a conversation. So we're going to continue to press that issue.
Thank you. Okay, I don't have any other questions. We have to wind up pretty quickly anyway for the commissioner's schedule. Representative Evangelist, go ahead, one more.
Very briefly, Commissioner, can we find out whether President Biden has executive authority to intervene? I know the previous president issued plenty of executive orders, but seriously, we're in trouble, and this is something the president could help us with.
Yeah, I can't speak to his executive orders, but I know from, for the example of a state executive order, you cannot have an executive order that supersedes state law. And my guess is the same thing would be true at the federal level. I know the conversations that the governor's having directly with the Secretary of Commerce. We're going to continue to press at that level. And hope for the best, but I'm not sure where President Biden stands. I do know, obviously, the legislature has submitted a letter to the president that was spearheaded by Representative Falkingham, so it'll be interesting to see the reply.
That was a good letter. Thanks, Representative Falkingham. And okay, so that's the information. The department is very reachable, always gets right back to everybody if you have any more specific questions. And I think we've covered it pretty well. And we know that our team is working to make this better. It won't go away, but make it better. So unless there's any other comment, I say we wrap this up. And this has been recorded. It will be available to folks to review. And I thank you very much for your time, the briefing. Thank you, department, everyone, for taking time out of your schedules and dealing with this important matter. So we will close for today's meeting. And thank you. See you all soon.
Thank you for the time.
Thank you.